and I am the marriage coach, and I welcome all of you today to come into the room and let's have a talk. We're going to talk about marriage. Of course, since I am the marriage coach, we're talking about marriage, and we're going to talk about what do we do when things go wrong. I want to welcome you all. I invite you all to share and to tap the heart or whatever device that you're on, whatever application that you're on. I am multi live streaming. I am Periscope, I am Facebook, and I am Instagram. Wow. So I've had a few false starts. Couldn't figure out why. Whenever I went on Periscope, all of a sudden it was all fuzzy and everything. And it turns out that the screen was backwards and it was looking at my phone and not at me. So we got that all figured out, thankfully. Oh, hello. I'm so glad that you're all here and joining us. And I just want you to know that we're going to have an easygoing chat today. I'm going to talk to you about a TV show to start with that got my husband and I in a conversation and about when things go wrong and how a couple react to it and how they relate to each other during the time when they are in a crisis mode and what that means for their relationship ongoing. I'm sure if you've been married that you've all had trouble at one time or another with life, because life happens, doesn't it? And it's beyond our control. We have no way of knowing how things are going to turn out sometimes, and sometimes all we can do is just hang on and like don't let go of the bar, you know, and they when you go to the fair and you're on these rides and you're going up and down and you're just hanging on for dear life. Sometimes that's what life is like, isn't it? Sometimes we can only hang on for dear life and hope we come through it on the other end. Fortunately and unfortunately, some marriages make it through to the other end and some marriages do not. And that is what we're talking about today. Have any of you ever watched that TV show called The Good Doctor? If anyone has seen The Good Doctor, I want you to give me hearts or say yes if you've seen The Good Doctor, because it is something that it's very popular, actually. It's one of the most popular TV shows out there. And yes, a time or two, this one has said. And yeah, so The Good Doctor is about this young man who is essentially he's autistic, and he is extremely intelligent, but his social skills are lacking. And how he copes and how the other staff members cope with him and crisis all the time. So the previous show that we just watched was about this couple who had been trying to have a baby for a very long time. And they tried many different methods apparently, and they finally got pregnant. But during the process prior to getting pregnant, this lady was suffering from severe depression. Now, depression can really, truly affect your marriage in a very negative way. If your partner is not understanding, and if they are not compassionate, it can have a very negative effect on your marriage, because the person who is depressed loses all ability to cope. Sometimes oftentimes it can be linked with anxiety, and when there's a crisis, things, they either kind of go numb or they overreact. There's lots of different things how it can impact a marriage and a person in who is suffering, and their spouse. Well, during that time they were trying very hard to get pregnant. And so when they found out that she was finally expecting a baby, they found out as well that the medication that she was on, that she had been taking because of the depression, had a very high level of being hurting a fetus, hurting the baby in the womb. There could be damage to the child as a result of this medication. So as soon as they found out, she stopped taking it immediately. Well, fast forward to hello there, blessings to you as well. So fast forward, they have the baby at the hospital, and it turns out that the baby is in distress. And they find out that the baby has, I believe it was a heart issue, and there was something wrong with the baby's heart, so they had to have surgery. And so, as you can imagine, these brand new parents were just so concerned and worried, and they were like hanging on to each other and crying and supporting each other because their brand new baby, was going into surgery. And then as baby was in surgery, they got talking, and all of a sudden it was an issue about the medication that she took, and it was her fault. The husband blamed her because of the medication she was on, and she was very hurt because it wasn't an intentional thing. She had no idea. As soon as she found out, she stopped taking it. But at that moment, there was a split. There was the blame game. He was blaming. She was devastated and hurt. And at first, they were hugging each other. They were very close, supporting each other. And suddenly, they separated. And you could see that as their mindset changed, how he changed his opinion and started blaming her for the problem with the baby. They actually not only physically were coming at each other, but they physically separated. And that's what happens. That's what happens when you play the blame game, when things go wrong, when tough times come, and instead of holding together and holding tight to each other and being a team, when you start playing the blame game and blaming each other, oh, you should have did this, you should have did that, or why didn't you do this, why didn't you do that, coulda, shoulda, woulda, I could have done this, I could have done that, you should have done this, you should have done that, the coulda, shoulda, if I only would have done this, I could have done this, I could have done that. Coulda, shoulda, woulda. Coulda, shoulda, woulda. That's a game we often play. Unfortunately, it's a game that we never, never, never win. Nobody can ever win coulda, shoulda, woulda. There are no winners in the coulda, shoulda, woulda game. And oftentimes, coulda, shoulda, woulda is the game that you start blaming yourself, or you start blaming your spouse. And coulda, shoulda, woulda is not a conversation that a couple should get into, because it does not have a positive end. Coulda, shoulda, woulda. I could have done this. I should have done this. I would have done this if. And it always starts, it's coulda, shoulda. I should have done this if I had known. I would have done this if I had known. I could have done this if, there's always an if. We don't know what the ifs are. We don't know things in advance. And to play coulda, shoulda, woulda, blame game, pointing fingers at each other, accusing, when things go wrong, that is going to be, it's going to make the situation much, 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 much worse. When we know that somebody did something wrong, and you're in the middle of the trouble and the trial, is it going to make any difference in the situation now if you start blaming them. If you start making a point, well, you should have did this or you did that. Was that going to make any difference? Will it make any difference in the situation now? No, it's done. You can't go back. You can't go back in history. You can't go back in time and change things. So oftentimes we really wish we could. We certainly, losing my voice, we wish we could go back in time. My goodness, there's so many times I wish I could go back in time and change things I said, change things I did, reactions that I had. You know, you could go through your entire life and there's all kinds of coulda, shoulda, wouldas. But you can't change it. You can't make it different. Excuse me. You can't make it different. So it's not a healthy thing to do for your marriage. It's not a healthy thing to do for yourself. It's not a healthy thing to do when you're blaming your spouse or somebody else. When you hit a hard time, when tough times come, and we are not guaranteed, you know, a perfect ride in life. You know, tough times come, things happen, things that are beyond our control sometimes, and things that are in our control, and we can make changes and we can do things to make things better. But we can't stop things in the middle. You know, if you're having a car accident and all of a sudden you can't do like what they do on TV, you know, hit stop and rewind the tape. We can't do that. You know, you can't, the car keeps going. You can put on your brakes. Sometimes you slide, sometimes you stop. But the fact is that it does not going to stop the fact that you were in that situation in the first place. You know, life happens. And we should be easier on ourselves. We should be easier on our spouse. Maybe we should be easier on our kids. Sometimes our kids get themselves in situations that, yeah, maybe they shouldn't have done this mistake. Sometimes they shouldn't have done that mistake. But that's how we learn, isn't it? Isn't that how we learn? We can explain to our kids, well, you know, I would suggest that the next time that something like this happens, that you try doing this instead, or try saying that instead. Make it a lesson instead of a time of accusing somebody, whether it's your husband or your wife or your child. Do you know what it does? It puts up walls. It puts up barriers. It causes a lot of hurt and a lot of extra pain on top of everything else. And it doesn't do any good at all. It only makes things worse. So I want to encourage you today, when things go wrong, when tough times come, try to take a moment. Take a moment and realize where you are and who you're with. Do you want to hurt them and make it worse? Or do you want to pull them tight and so that you can be supportive and help each other? You know, it's so hard sometimes to look beyond the initial shock, the initial pain, when tough times come. And it is to see the other side, the light at the end of the tunnel, the possibility of what could happen and whether it's good or bad, and think, how are we going to get through this? How am I going to get through this? How are we as a couple going to get through this? And stay a couple. You know, if we take that moment, that thought, I think the reactions and the way we treat each other will be very different than if we didn't take that moment. And, you know, when we were watching that TV show, when the people, they pulled apart and they started, you know, blaming each other and hurting each other, my husband and I started talking, and he was like, "Oh man, if this baby dies, I don't know if this couple will still be married at the end of it." How many times have you heard about? It's a terrible thing to even talk about, but have you heard about couples who have a child that dies tragically, and in a year, 2 years, they're divorced because they can't handle it together. They can't support each other and get through it together. It's very, very sad. And then they ended up getting divorced, and then they're dealing with it alone. It's very, very sad, but it happens all the time. And if you are aware of it in advance, this kind of conversation, talking to your spouse, I would suggest that you talk to your spouse about how you're going to. Google said 90% divorce. Yeah, that's what happens, because they don't support each other. They blame each other. They play coulda, shoulda, woulda. They mourn separately. They mourn separately. They don't mourn together. They don't go through it together. They go through it separately. They're both in pain, but yet they're not helping each other get through the pain. Sometimes it's easier when you're in pain to focus on helping the other person that's in pain, and the next thing you know, you're feeling better because you're helping somebody else. Or you're crying on each other's shoulders and holding each other. How much better is that? This is something that happens to marriages, and not necessarily losing a child, but lots of different things, major things that can happen. Car accidents. One of the spouses becomes sick or become very ill. Bankruptcy. You could list a whole bunch of things that you can go through that can be very traumatic. And unless the couple is willing to support each other, the trauma can, when you say you're going through something traumatic, it means that you actually experience a trauma. I've gone through, car accidents where the car was demolished, and thank God, I ended up okay. I give him praise and the glory, but I was traumatized. It was traumatic, and in this particular case I'm thinking about, I had a head-on collision, and it was a big turn, but it was an icy road, and my car wouldn't turn. It just kept going straight right into this other car, which was also sliding my way. And yes, and so it it was quite the trauma. And at the beginning, my husband was upset that I wrecked the car, and then when I broke down in front of him, he was like, "Oh my goodness, like, forget the car. I'm so sorry. Are you okay?" He knew I was physically okay, but he didn't realize at the beginning that I was traumatized because of it. And, it's important to be aware of how our spouse is doing when things are going bad. And because if something happens to one, it happens to you both. And whether it's directly or indirectly, it affects the both of you. Good things and bad things affect the both of you. And so it's always best to be supportive, to not blame each other, to pull together instead of pull apart. Now, in this show, the Good Doctor, the baby had the operation, and I'm trying to remember now. I think they ended up having there was something that they couldn't do, and that if they did one way, the baby would not be able to thrive and would eventually die a very painful dreadful death, or they gave them the choice of turning off the machines and letting the baby die. Well, the mother absolutely would not even consider turning off the machines and letting the baby die, because she tried and she worked so hard to have this baby, that this baby was the only baby she was ever going to have, and it was all about keeping and saving this baby with her. Her husband, on the other hand, was like, I can't imagine, I can't let my baby suffer. You know, if there's nothing they can do, I can't let the baby suffer. And he chose to allow the baby to die. And so once again, they are at odds. And, you know, this time she's upset with him. First time he was upset with her because of the medication. This time she was upset with him. And they became more and more separated, blaming each other. And, well, if you hadn't taken the medication, well, I can't let the baby die. How can you let the baby die? How can you choose to let the baby die? All these kinds of accusations. And they, you know, they were getting further and further apart. And it was a terrible, terrible thing. So when, in the meantime, and just like on any good show, somebody comes up with an idea. So the good doctor, the autistic doctor, he thinks of things in a way that the other doctors don't think. And I love how they do it. They actually show the body parts and everything, and how he's thinking and everything. And it's kind of like in the air. They show the diagrams and everything, and you know, that's kind of cool. I think it's cool. Anyway, and so he suggests another solution, but this was in front of the parents. He suggested at the hospital, and when they were at the point of turning the machines off, they decided to give the baby, have a moment, and so they all just stood there, closed their eyes, and I think they were praying for the baby. They didn't come out and say that, but they closed their eyes and they had a moment time to honor the baby. And during that time, the good doctor, the good doctor, he came up with an idea and he suggested it to them. And so they tried it, and they were able to save the baby and work it all out. You know, it's always a happy ending, isn't there, on the TV shows? And so when they came back, and they told them that they were able to save the baby and not turn the machines off after all. This time, it was the husband who was guilty. You could see he was the one. I mean, he was happy, like the wife was like ecstatic, happy, and she runs over, she throws her arms around him and everything, and he's racked with guilt. You could see that. And you know, she looks up and she sees this, and they comfort each other. And at that moment, we knew that everything was going to be okay and their marriage would be saved. And because they basically understood how each other were feeling, and they were supportive of how they were feeling. And it's always important that we are supportive of each other, because we all have the right to our own feelings. We do not have to always agree on everything. And we can have disagreements, and we can have conversations where we don't have the same point of view, but we each have the right to that point of view. And we can have a conversation where we explain our point of view, but at the end of the day, it's not our place to try to force somebody to think your way. You can agree to disagree. My husband and I, we agree to disagree a lot of times, and we'll come back to the same conversations over and over again. Conversations, not arguments. And sometimes we ended up both agreeing at some point, and sometimes we just don't agree on things, and that's okay, because we don't have to agree on everything. There were times in our marriage, especially when we were first married, we couldn't agree on the living room furniture. We were very first married. Our apartment was empty. All it had was a bed and my husband's brand new Harman Kardon stereo. And if you remember the 80s, stereos were big. Speakers were big. That's all we had in the house. So we bought table and chairs. We agreed on that. That was good. And we bought a bedroom set. That was good. But when it came to the living room furniture, we were not in agreement at all. And we argued and we fought and we tried to convince the other person. And so the only thing we did was we agreed to disagree. And we decided that we weren't going to buy living room furniture until we both agreed. So months went by. I got used to sitting on the floor with my back against the wall. Oh, Lord. When I look back, it's like, oh, we're both very independent, very stubborn people. Neither one of us would give in, and we wouldn't compromise. And this went on and on. I'm being honest here. I actually talk about this in my new book that's just coming out, actually. I wasn't planning on bringing that up. I have a new book coming out. I'm so excited. It's going to the publishers, I believe, this at the end of the week. I'm so excited, and I can't wait to tell you about it. But we're not going to dwell on that right now. Okay, calm down. So we agreed to disagree. And finally, we had no living room furniture for months. And then finally, we decided that, okay, let's go shopping for furniture again. And this time, that piece of that furniture that we were arguing about, it's not we're going to disqualify it, because if we can't agree on it, we're not going to get that one. You know, to this day, we're married 35 years now. And I'm so blessed, because we almost, we can, it's close to divorce. We had a very dysfunctional marriage. I'll list some things that happened in my marriage. Dysfunctional marriage, emotional, verbal abuse, threats, a lot of fighting, a lot of tears, women's shelter, separation, divorce proceedings, and everything was concluded. Even the moving truck was ordered for me to take my daughters, and I was going to move thousands of miles away, and everything was approved by with the lawyers. Everything was signed off. I had consent to do this, to take the kids and go thousands of miles away. Everything was planned. And then a job that I had applied for months before, that I thought I didn't think I got, to manage a bank that was coming into town. I suddenly got a job, and I got the job, and so everything stopped. And it's like, oh my goodness, what do I do? Do I stay in town and keep this job and see and try to start over here, or do I just decline it and I go ahead with my plans? I thank God that I decided to stay and keep this job. I believe that this was God intervening in our lives. And over time, lots of counseling, anger management, personal counseling, marriage counseling. By the way, we went to several marriage counselors, and none of them did any good. In fact, they only made things worse. Did you know, one of our marriage counselors actually told us this, that only 3% of couples who go to a marriage counselor actually stay married. 3%. But it's 80, the statistics, and I just looked it up recently, about 80% of marriages that go to a marriage coach remain married. Isn't that interesting? I thought that was very interesting. Anyway, we decided that counselors weren't working, and we were going to see what we could do. And so I have a degree in psychology. I went and hit the books. And we bought all kinds of books from on marriage, relationships, things like that. And we read, and we studied, and we determined that, and we talked a lot. We talked a lot, and we decided that a plan of action, let's put it that way. And we implemented it in all the different areas of our lives, this plan of action, this one key that we changed and implemented in every area of our lives. And I can tell you, it's 35 years now, and we're living a life story that we never dreamed was ever possible. We really, truly are. And we learned one of the things by my throat implementing this one key that the book is about, because I need to share this, because this is one of the things that I teach my clients, and they always have really quick change in their marriage. Things start changing very, very quickly for the good. Positive steps make positive results, right? And when they implement this one thing in all the different areas of their lives, they see a big change. And this is one of the things that we developed in our life. And here we are all these years later. And you know, it's so good. So I needed to share it. I needed to share it with everybody. So I wrote a book. Oh my goodness. Where is the binder? Oh, here's my binder. This is a hard copy that I printed off. And to take it to my editor so that they could look at it, do the grammar checks and everything, and all that stuff. And so we learned the importance of not blaming each other. We learned the importance of pulling together, even when you want to blame the other person, for the good of the relationship, for the good of your partnership, for the good of your marriage. You need to find a way to put the hurt aside and not blame each other, but find the lessons and find how you can help each other. Because when, like when I had that car accident, for example, yes, I wrecked the car, and that wasn't a good thing because my husband needed that to get back and forth to work. It was not a good thing. He worked an hour and a half drive away. He needed that car, so it was a big deal. But it was more important that you can replace the car, right? It was more important that he saw how I was feeling, because if all he cared about was the car, that would have hurt me even more. I was already feeling bad enough that I wrecked the car. But if he didn't even see how I was feeling about that, how bad I was feeling about it, how traumatized I was from the accident, this, scary event in my life, it would have affected our marriage in a very negative way. Things, life happens, things happen, and it's not always the big things like that. It's even the smaller things, when you ask your partner to do something for you, and, they get busy and they forget. And sometimes we make it into this big, huge deal. Like we just freak out on them and just like, why didn't you? Blah, blah, blah. You think that is more important than blah, blah, blah. And we're going off on them, right? We're just like freaking out on them. Or we're stomping around, we're slamming things, or banging things, or we're giving them the silent treatment. Or, like there's so many ways that we react when the other person doesn't do what we want them to do. And they may have a good reason, but we don't want to hear it because, hey, I asked you to do something and you didn't do it. You know, sometimes we don't want to hear it. Sometimes we don't want to take a moment. We need to take a moment and listen and not put things off. Like when they'll say, oh, well, I forgot. Why did you forget? Can somebody explain to me how you can give a reason for forgetting? How could you not know that you had to do that when you forgot? Ask my brain. I can't, you know, I've been asked those kinds of questions so many times. So I would like totally forget something, right? I was really bad at that. I'm trying to be a lot better at that now. I write stuff down. I text myself, I'll send a timed message, things like that. I'll make an appointment so it will ding and it'll remind me I got to do something. Because when I get started doing something, I kind of get into it, and I lose track of time. And so I would, I was like, well, how could you forget? Well, I was doing this. I was like, well, this was more important than that. Yeah, but I forgot. Yeah, but you should have done this. Yeah, but I forgot. And we get upset with each other. I send my husband to, he goes and gets some groceries and I tell him as he's going out the door, hi. I tell him as we're going out the door, oh, don't forget such and such. Don't forget to do this. It's like, okay, but that's not on the list. Like we've made the list, but the last minute I add something, right? As he's going out the door, and he comes home and he's like, did you do such and such? Oh no, I forgot. How could you forget? I told you just before you left. We got to be easier on each other and stop blaming each other all the time for things when sometimes it's just beyond our control. Sometimes it's beyond our control and we can't, it's not fair. It's not fair to blame our spouses for things all the time. Sometimes we just need to be like, okay, well, we'll get it next time. We'll do it next time or whatever. Or I'll go do it now if it's important. We need to give each other a break, Be more sensitive. Be more sensitive to each other's needs. And when things go wrong, try not to play the coulda, shoulda, woulda. I could have done this. I would have done that. I should have done something else. Or you should have did it. Or you could have done this. Or you would have done this. Like coulda, shoulda, woulda is a game you'll never win. And so don't blame it on yourself and don't play it on your spouse, okay? And try to be sensitive to how they are feeling and how they go through things. If they're going through the same thing as you are, whether it's directly related or indirectly related, because you're a couple, you're going through it together. And try to remember that. And I'm the marriage coach, and if you're not following me, please make sure you follow me, okay? Because I'm going to be making some announcements, let you know when and where you can get this book, and I'm going to start talking about the book. I didn't mean to talk about it today. Sorry about that. I kind of got excited. And I'll be in the book. I tell our story and how we changed our lives. And so that's exciting new news, and there'll be more things coming up down the road. So great, absolutely. Watch the replay and make sure everybody that you share this, okay? Because this is that's something that we a lesson that we've learned, and we notice when we're watching TV shows, you see couples, when bad things happen. Are they pulling together or are they pulling apart? And you can't stop life from hitting you with a left hook sometimes. Sometimes it just things just happen and it's beyond our control. And that's the time, especially when we need to be supportive of each other and help each other go through it together, supporting each other. Even if you're hurting, you support the other person, because when you're supporting each other, that helps the hurt go away a little bit more, helps you, it comforts the soul when you are supporting each other, when you're pulling together. And you have a much better chance of surviving this together than apart. So I want to just encourage you today to remember those things. And if you enjoy this, can you give me some hearts, give me some hearts and share this. I don't know, I can't see what anybody is doing. So I am hoping that you've enjoyed this. And I want to bless you today. You have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful evening. Give your husband, give your wife a little snuggle and a kiss on the cheek. And I'll see you again next time. Bye-bye. Stop broadcast. End. Do you want to end this live video? Yes, I do.